Thank you for the introduction, Linda, and thank you all for coming. It's really nice to be here with you again, even though I'm not really here with you. So let's start. Italy has about the same number of national holidays as the United States. Banks and government offices are closed. Most people have the day off. Unlike the United States, over half of the official holidays, feste civile, civic holidays, are also traditional religious holy days, a fact we can attribute to the long history of the political power of the Roman Catholic Church in what is now Italy. The Church did not even recognize the legitimacy of the Italian state until 1929, nearly 70 years after unification. And it was not until 1985 that Catholicism ceased to be the official religion of Italy. So Catholicism is deeply embedded in Italian culture. And to some extent, so are even more ancient Celtic and Roman influences, whose rituals were much connected to the agricultural cycle. So alongside these thoroughly secular holidays, we have Liberation Day, which in April, which marks the liberation from the Nazis, Labor Day on May 1, Republic Day on June 2nd, which marks the referendum in which the Italian people rejected the monarchy and established the republic. So besides these secular holidays, right next to them, we find these religious holidays, the Epiphany, Easter and Easter Monday, All Saints' Day, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, Christmas Day, and St. Stephen's Day. And the two remaining holidays are actually rather raucous, popular celebrations, as well as being major holy days for the church. And these are New Year's Day and Ferragosto on August 15th. Besides the national holidays, Italians have lots of regional and local festivals. Many celebrate patron saints, like Saints Peter and Paul for Rome, or San Gennaro in Naples. Others are tied to events in the liturgical calendar, like Carnevale in Venice and actually all over Italy. They are reminders of historical and mythical events and reinforce community ties. Almost always, the celebrations include religious and secular elements, entertainment, and shared meals. So there are lots of holidays, but I'm really only going to talk about a few of them. All Saints and All Souls, San Martino, San Valentino, and Ferragosto, with a bit of a word about the Christmas season. And I'm going to focus on a small village in Abruzzo, Fano Adriano. It's where my paternal grandparents were born. And several years ago, I lived there with my husband when I was on sabbatical from UW Manitowoc. At its peak in the 1950s, Fano Adriano had a population of about 1,500 people. Today, the year-round population is less than 100. But the summer population peaks in August at about 1,200 because former residents and the descendants of residents return for summer vacations and family visits. I like to think of it as a new kind of transhumans. Until the mid-20th century, the economy of the town, as for much of mountainous Abruzzo, was based on transhuman sheep herding. This is the kind of animal husbandry based on moving livestock from one grazing ground to another in a seasonal cycle. In the old days, many Fanese men spent their winters with the sheep herds in the pasture lands around Rome and their summers in Fano Adriano, pasturing the sheep in the mountains above the town. That way of life began to decline after the world wars, when the international market for wool shifted to Australia and New Zealand, and the pace of industrialization picked up in Italy. Since then, the village economic base has shrunk drastically. Most of the year-round residents are retired or employed in the nearby provincial capital, Teramo. For the Fanese, then, the holidays are when they return to their home village and reinforce ties of friendship, kinship, and identity. There is no doubt that many of the celebrations are meaningful as religious rituals for the devout. But even the ones who smoke outside the church during Mass are sincere in their devotion to Fano Adriano. Let's start with Tutti I Santi, or Ogni Santi, and I Morti. They're November 1 and 2. We fallen away Catholics recognize these as All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day. These have pagan roots too, in the Celtic division of the year into two halves, one of growth and life, one of quiescence, repose, and death. As they did with many pagan festivals and celebrations of the old gods, the early church fathers modified, even usurped these events and reworked them as Christian holy days. For Catholics, All Saints' Day celebrates all the holy martyrs, not just those canonized and famous enough to have their own day in the liturgical calendar. All Souls' Day celebrates all the dead, whether they made it to heaven, ended up in hell, or are lingering in purgatory. Celebrating this day is focused on church, family, and the cemetery. As in most Italian towns, the cemetery in Fano Adriano is a walled enclosures on the outskirts, with most burials in crypts or small family mausoleums, with photos of the dead in little frames next to their names. In a little place like Fano, older people visit the cemetery often, cleaning off the front of the tombs of their loved ones, adding fresh flowers, maybe lighting a candle. For I Santi, All Saints' Day, there's a formal Mass in the church. But for I Morti, All Souls' Day, there's a Mass in the cemetery, rain or shine. In the courtyard between the rows of crypts, they set up an altar and a microphone for the priest, and the people stand in the open space to hear the Mass. After that, people split up to go to their family tombs. And it's like a visit. People gather in little clusters and chit-chat about the people who are buried there. If you're a visitor, you'll be introduced to family members who have passed on. Here's my mother. Here's her sister. See how much they look alike? It's that kind of thing. And it's lovely. Whole families will have come up from Rome or from Teramo or L'Aquila to remember those who are gone and to feast with those who are gathered for the remembrance. These prayers and family gatherings happen all over Italy on these days. Next, I'm going to talk about San Martino. This is a celebration of St. Martin of Tours on November 11th. He was a Roman soldier who became a bishop. It's also the celebration of the new wine, the first time people taste the wine that was made last year. And it's the time of the chestnut harvest. So St. Martin is the reason for the party. But in Fano Adriano, it is not particularly religious as these things go. It really is a party for the whole town, celebrated in its oldest piazza. Tables are set up, and a tripod that holds a yard-wide pan in which chestnuts are roasted over a roaring fire. There are demijohns of red wine. Sausages, pasta, bread are all part of the feast. And occasionally, it includes a spontaneous reading by a local poet. Now, no one says too much about this part of San Martino and Fano Adriano. But throughout the mountains of Abruzzo, St. Martin has become associated with cuckolds. How isn't exactly clear, but it probably stems from the timing of the feast. Traditionally, this date coincided with cattle fairs in the last warm days of summer. Opportunities for adulterous affairs were created by people being away from home, mixing it up with people from other villages. Or the association may derive from the mythical love affair between the Roman god of war, which is echoed in the name Martin, and Venus, the goddess of love. And when Venus' husband, Vulcan, complained to the other gods of Olympus, they mocked him rather than punishing the lovers. That mockery is echoed in a custom found in some parts of Abruzzo. There's a kind of parade plus serenade. The young men of the town walk through the streets singing and end up laughing and singing at the house of someone whose wife has reportedly been unfaithful to him. So here we have a holiday that celebrates a saint, rejoices in the new wine, and reminds everyone that there are standards to be maintained. Now, a quick word about the Christmas season. The Italians say, Il Natale con I tuoi, Capodanno con chi vuoi. Christmas with your family, New Year's with whoever you want. And that seems to be what they do. There are 4 national holidays, which are also Christian holy days that comprise the Christmas season. Christmas Day, St. Stephen's Day on the 26th, New Year's Day, and the Epiphany on January 6th. As in the US, there's shopping and present giving, decorations, parties, family dinners, and more church going than many people do during the rest of the year. Christmas trees are rare. Rather, presepe, or nativity scenes, are the most important decoration of the season. This practice seems to originate with St. Francis of Assisi, who supposedly created the first Christmas creche to explain what was going on to the children of Assisi. People arranged presepe in their homes, and churches, cities, and even tiny villages have them on display. In Fano Adriano, it's Christmas Eve that's the big deal. That night, a meatless meal is served, but it is a feast. A soup of chickpeas and broth, pasta with tomato sauce, maybe mussels, clams, octopus and oysters, fried fish and squid, codfish, cauliflower, and greens dressed in anchovies. And then come the cookies and the cakes. People then play cards and games waiting for midnight to roll around. Then it's off to church and then home again to open presents. New Year's Eve seems to be essentially a secular celebration, even though the next day is a holy day. People gather to play cards and games until late. And then at midnight, people set off fireworks from their balconies and gardens. A larger-than-life, puppet-like doll has been created by the young people. And down in the piazza in front of the church, they built a huge bonfire. They take this puppet, La Pupazza, and dance her around the square and around the fire. And at midnight, they toss her into the fire. Then there's champagne and more fireworks that echo like a bombardment off the walls surrounding the piazza. The Epiphany on January 6th is the last blast of the Christmas season. For the church, this day celebrates the 3 wise men who, guided by a star, came to worship the baby king. For the children, the central character is La Befana, an old woman who carries a broom and brings sweets and presents to all the children of Italy. Now, this quick description does not do justice to the Christmas season, not a bit. But I want to move on to talk about some other less well-known holidays, like San Valentino, February 14. Saint Valentine is the patron saint of Fano Adriano. He is said to have protected the village from the plague. His feast day is an important and solemn affair. There's a mass, followed by a procession through the village. First, the most devout women line up in 2 parallel files, followed by 2 men carrying the banner of Fano Adriano, along with the mayor. Then come the priest and his attendants, then the deacons of the parish. 4 men carry the statue of the saint on a very ornate platform. Okay. And behind them come just about everyone else in town. The village isn't large, but the procession winds through every neighborhood, out to the perimeter, and back to the piazza in front of the church. Along the way, the priest recites the rosary, and people chant the responses. The houses are decorated, festooned with banners, or with the housewife's best blanket or most beautiful tablecloth hanging from the windowsills. Watching from the windows are mostly the elderly and children too small to walk the hour that the procession will take. On returning to the piazza, the men carry the saint to their position in front of the church door. They face out into the piazza, and there is a final blessing and prayer by the priest. Then a volley of fireworks explodes and echoes off the walls, signaling the end of the ceremony. By now, it's about time for pranzo, the midday meal. The Mass and the procession, with their hymns and prayers, are organized by the parish priest, but the pranzo is organized by the pro loco, a local group of boosters. They have everyone in town, maybe 60 people, signed up for the meal, which is prepared by the owner of the tavern with help from volunteers. The two standout dishes here are a bean and mushroom dish that's served over toasted bread, and timbalo, a dish of layered crepes, sauces, cheeses, mushrooms, and tiny meatballs. It's wonderful. Now, many more holidays fall between San Valentino in February and Ferragosto in August, but I'll only mention two because I find them particularly endearing. Father's Day in Italy is celebrated on March 19, the feast of St. Joseph. He's the stalwart husband of the Virgin Mary and the patient stepfather of Jesus. In July, Fano Adriano celebrates La Festa degli Alpini to honor the men of the area who served in the mountain corps of the Italian army. First, the mayor gives a speech honoring the veteran Alpini, who have come from all over the province. Then the priest and the people hike up to a tiny chapel in the mountains above the town for Mass and return to the piazza for pranzo. There is always pranzo involved. Ferragosto, on August 15th, is almost as big a holiday for getting families and friends together as Christmas. Ferragosto literally means the holidays of Augustus. Its origins go even further back. Long before the Emperor Augustus, the people celebrated the grain harvest with collective rites and banquets, drinking and sexual excesses, in which everyone could participate, even servants and slaves. Typically held in September, in 18 BC, Augustus moved the holidays to the 1st of August, the month that bears his name, hoping to take some credit for the good times. 300 years later, Christianity was the religion of the Roman Empire, but the old holiday persisted. Pagan as the celebrations were, they were so ingrained that the church decided to Christianize them rather than try to eradicate them. Thus, in the 6th century, the Ferie Augusti were absorbed and transformed into the celebration of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin into heaven. Fast forward to the 20th century, and the nationalist flavor of Ferragosto was enhanced by Mussolini, who encouraged it as a holiday for workers. The National Railroad offered subsidized 1- and 2-day fares so that people could take a holiday to the shore or to the mountains. Now, in Fano Adriano, all of August is a celebration, which seems like what Augustus had in mind. Early in the month, there is a sagra, or feast of Scorepele, the traditional crepes made with flour, eggs, and water, not with milk, as is the case for French crepes. The women cook the scorepele over propane grills in the piazza and serve them with savory or sweet fillings, like Nutella for the children. Then there is La Festa di San Rocco, a special protector of the lower court of the town, which includes a veneration of the saint, who's particularly dear to young people, and a dance in the lower piazza. Then there's an art fair, and prizes are awarded. There are races for children, and there used to be horse races. Although Ferragosto coincides with the Feast of the Assumption, an important holy day, the general flavor of the day is more of party than of prayer. As soon as Mass is over, people set out on picnics and outdoor parties, and there are fireworks after dark. The crowning event of summer in Fano Adriano, though, is San Valentino, again, on the last weekend of August. Now, recall that raising sheep used to be the basis of the economy, and that most of the men, and many young men and women, spent half the year in Rome. They would have been away from Fano Adriano in February, when the patron saint was celebrated. So it became customary to reprise the saint's day in August, when everyone was home, before the men and the sheep began their 2-week walk to Rome. Nowadays, leading up to the day itself, there are lots of activities. Movies for the kids are projected on a huge screen set up in the piazza. Troops of itinerant actors present plays in the regional dialect, which is nearly incomprehensible if you only speak Italian. Musicians are hired and there are dances in the piazza. Neighborhoods organize dinners. So as you walk around town, you see rows of tables set for dozens of people. There is a tombolo, a lottery with a cash prize. On the final Sunday, there is, again, a high mass and a religious procession that winds all through the village. Except now, the weather is hot and beautiful, and there are hundreds, not dozens of people in the procession. There's a marching band that plays in the piazza before the mass begins and that accompanies the procession. Afterwards, the fireworks boom in the piazza, and everyone mills around waiting for the ringing of the bells. For this, participants climb into the bell tower of the church, one at a time, and sound the bells, each creating his or her own rhythm. Anyone can do this as long as they're tall enough to reach the bells. When the final bell is sounded, people disperse and begin saying their goodbyes, packing up and heading back to Rome or L'Aquila or Naples or Ascoli Piceno. Modern life means you go where the work is, but the holy days and holidays of August bring the Farnese back to their mountains to renew their ties to the place and to the community. Now, I picked these festas because they're particular to Fano Adriano, but similar local celebrations happen all over Italy all year long. It impresses me that people draw such a strong sense of identity and belonging from returning to Fano and creating year after year the same kinds of communal events that their parents and grandparents did. It takes a lot of time and effort, and the people who have money and skills contribute to make it happen. The parish, the municipal government, volunteer groups all work together. They take pride in being from Fano Adriano and of Fano Adriano. I suppose such strong bonds have the potential for creating insider-outsider kinds of conflicts. But in our years of visiting Italy, we haven't seen much of that, at least not in the province of Teramo. Rather, the ritual return and celebrations seem to give people a steadiness, a way to know who they are in a world that can render us anonymous participants in a global culture. And as our holidays are fast approaching, I suppose we should think about what's going on here, that for many Italians, these holidays connect them not just to their family, not just to their friends, but to their broader community in a way that I think is very meaningful to them and to observe. Just watching it, it feels different from over the river and through the woods to grandmother's house we go, where in fact we celebrate our nuclear families and perhaps our extended families, but the broader community is the context rather than the reason for our festivities. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season, and thank you again for inviting me to speak.